The following is brought to you by Bleacher Report. If you guys want to check out my live post-game reaction show, make sure to have the Bleacher Report app downloaded and ready to fire up right after the game. You'll find me in the Chargers section. Bolt up.
Kyoto Bolt fam, it's the director here on Bleacher Report giving our instant reaction to what we just witnessed in the Week 1 matchup, Chargers versus Miami Dolphins, which of course resulted in a final score of 36-34, and giving the Chargers a start of the season at 0-1. Definitely not the outcome that we were looking for. We're hoping to dissect this game, figure out what went wrong and what the Chargers, more importantly, need to do different next week in order to right the ship. A lot of opinions in the chat. Yeah, I can definitely tell you guys that there's going to be some opinions from this game. Of course, a fresh wound, a little bit easier to throw pain at in terms of who might be responsible of that. But we'll go ahead and dissect that together. The first thing I'm seeing a lot of in the chat, and first off, you guys can hear me in the chat, right? You guys are good. Definitely make sure you guys are throwing in the chat some of your concerns after this Week 1, some of the questions you might have, and even venting a little bit. Let me know you guys are hearing me in the chat. And we'll grab some of these talking discussions. The very first thing I'm seeing a lot of in this one is certainly the results of J.C. Jackson's actions that may have resulted in a couple of bad situations for the Chargers going into the second half. The first one, obviously, I think we're referring to is the PI right before going into the tunnel in the second half that resulted in a field goal by the Miami Dolphins. Drawing that PI, it really felt like something you would see from a rookie coming from J.C. Jackson, which first off is very tough for me to say because J.C. had to overcome tremendous heights in order to come back to the football field after suffering what would end a lot of other DB's careers. And seeing him come back into this game and perform the way he did, for the most part, I was feeling pretty optimistic about it. I was like, wow, thank you, JC. He's back. He's back. He comes in and gets an interception. Beautiful. But it just feels like a lot of that is overwritten with some of the decision-making that we saw that, honestly, coming from a vet, I don't know if I can stand in the way and say, hey, man, tough break. That's something that just cannot happen. And that pass interference right before half, which a lot of times you say to yourself, you know, if we can't overcome a field goal, then do we deserve to win this game? Well, in this instance, the field goal was the difference. A result of 36-34. That field goal would have been the difference of a win or loss this week. And that's the kind of mistake that just cannot happen, especially from a veteran player like J.C. Jackson in the secondary. The other thing people weren't super stoked on, which I'm not going to blame him too much on because he had just made a big play. It is up to the offense to carry that any way they can, was the interception itself. J.C. Jackson jumping a route, coming down with an awesome interception. And instead of going down for the touchback in the end zone, ends up running it out and giving the Chargers starting field position inside the 10-yard line. And that is definitely going to make life a little bit more difficult for your offense. More importantly, makes it a lot less likely that you're going to be able to capitalize on that opportunity given from the interception to go back the other way and capitalize on the opportunity. That is something, again, that feels a little off for a player of J.C. Jackson's caliber. Of course, not just talking in terms of his talent, but as well as his experience. We're talking about a veteran player on this team that has had a lot of success back in his day with the Patriots. We got to see that decision-making in the foreground. I think, if anything, you bring on veteran players and leadership to show the young guns how it's done, as well as pulling together the team in terms of decision-making, in terms of experience and wisdom, and executing when the moment calls for it. And in the moment, a couple of times this game, the moment called for J.C. Jackson to not shove the wide receiver, resulting in a PI, as well as going down in the end zone after the interception. Now, I'm not going to say that J.C. was completely horrible the entire week this week. I think we saw a lot of good things in terms of coverage. I think in terms of him keeping up with Tyreek Hill, we saw him get burnt a lot. That, to me, is as a result of Tyreek just being a pretty unique player in the NFL, man. Very few players are going to keep up with Tyreek and that raw speed. But in terms of his positioning and in terms of his coverage, JC definitely looked a lot better than he did last season. Does that make up for some of the bad mistakes and the boneheaded mistakes that could have cost us this game? And in the end, I do think cost us this game. No, but it does tell me that there is a road for improvement on JC and concerns to what we saw last season. So I think I like getting that out of the way right away. J.C. Jackson, although improving, definitely cost us this game in terms of his decision making, and that's definitely not something you want us to see. Let's go ahead and jump over to some of the statage here. I want to share with you guys some of the things that we learned from this game as far as the Chargers are concerned. Let's actually go ahead and put me up here on this side. And here we go. I think you guys like the entire screen. Boom. All right. So final score here. And you guys seeing this okay? Yeah, I think we're seeing everything just fine here. Let's go ahead and take a look at some of the stats from this game. Starting with the Dolphins. Now, this is where things get really insane to me. Tua Tagovailoa. The argument between Tua and Justin Herbert, it's going to be something that you see for pretty much the entirety of both of these players' careers, right? To see Tua Tagovailoa go out there and throw for 466 yards, 3 touchdowns, and interception is absolutely wild. And to complement that number, of course, there had to have been a weapon out there utilizing all of that, passing yardage from Tua, and that's going to be Tyreek Hill, who went for over 200 yards and 2 touchdowns. If you told me this was going to be the result of this game, I would have come and found you somewhere where you live and hit you in the face with a pie. Like, haha, you're funny and all, but that ain't funny to me. This is the world we live in, where Tua just put up Madden-type numbers in Week 1 versus the Chargers at home. Absolutely insane. Now, I don't say this to Chargers fans to tick you off or put you in the dumps or make myself upset, because I could certainly go Hulk mode right now with what we saw. I say this in terms of reflecting on what I believe a big problem with this team is right now. And it's something that I think is very peculiar if you look at the lengths the Chargers went through the past couple of seasons, I would say since 2021, to become a good defensive team. And it started with the hiring of a defensive-minded head coach in Brandon Staley, who led the #1 defense with the Los Angeles Rams back in 2020. It started with the Chargers being one of the top teams in spending. The Chargers definitely have a lot of money locked up in the defensive side of the ball. Lots of stars, lots of firepower on paper. And this, to me, and the reason I'm bringing it up this week, reflects on that not working. And I feel like, yes, you're going up against a great offensive team. I think the Dolphins are going to be a force this season, mainly behind Tyreek. And a lot of people will give Tua flack because he doesn't have the biggest arm in terms of power. He is very accurate, however. And when you pair that up with 2 speedsters, it does create situations like we saw today. You can have good corners. You can have good DBs. You can have really good edge rushers like Khalil Mack and Joey Bosa. It doesn't much matter if that ball's getting to that speedster very quickly. Not a lot of time for the edge rushers to get to the quarterback. Not a lot of time for these guys in terms of coverage to stay on their target. We saw Tyreek Hill burn everybody this week. Not just J.C. Jackson, but as well as at least a couple of times Michael Davis as well. So let's all keep that in mind. Good offense, good team for the Miami Dolphins. However, I don't care who we're playing. I don't care if we're playing, the Kansas City Chiefs last season, Super Bowl victors, 466 yards by any player is unacceptable to me. 215 yards receiving by any player is unacceptable to me, right? The points put up and a defense that has this much money and talent tied up into it is not acceptable to me. And that there lies the problem. Kicking off the season for the 2023 Los Angeles Chargers, the defense must improve. And when you're looking at a defense with this many resources, with this much talent, with this much money, with the defensive-minded head coach, the results must be better. And that is something where I feel like we have opened up the book of 2023. The 2023 Los Angeles Chargers and the narrative thereof has officially begun to be written. In Chapter 1, we're going to write about how disappointing this unit on defense rolled out there against the Dolphins and allowed a historic performance from Tua and Tyreek Hill. This is something that's going to go in the history books, folks. This is a big time game for those two individual players, and it happened under our watch, and more specifically under Brandon Staley's watch. Now, this opens up a talking point that I think a lot of you have been asking me questions about in the last couple, maybe since the beginning of the offseason when we brought in Kellen Moore as the offensive coordinator. You guys say, Director, what are we thinking about Kellen Moore possibly threatening the head coaching position of Brandon Staley? And for the most part, I've kind of brushed it off like, we'll think about that when, the time is right. We'll cross that bridge. You know what I mean? Now that we're here week 1 and we see the difference in quality between the two units, right? Justin Herbert, yes, is the biggest difference maker on this team, and there are a lot of weapons on that side of the ball. But I think when you look at both sides of the ball, I think you would agree that defense has the more resources put behind it. And to see Kellen Moore work with, of course, it's a great offense with Justin Herbert, and put up 34 points in his first game, that's very impressive. Kellen Moore, that's a brownie point right there for the offense. In the first game, to see the defense perform as poorly as it did, that's a point against Brandon Staley. And I guess you could convince me that over the course of a season, we might see a shift in power in terms of maybe the seat is a lot hotter than we anticipated for Brandon Staley, and we might have at least a contender in terms of a replacement on the staff already in that offensive coordinator. And I think we're seeing a lot of that in today's modern NFL. We're seeing a lot of offensive-minded head coaches to step up into those positions and turn teams into super teams. And I feel like the Chargers, I think we took a first step in that direction today. Again, I'm not going to take sides and pick sides right now, but I will tell you that the problem with this team, with this particular game, was the defense. And unfortunately, as everything does, it falls on the shoulders of the head coach, who in this specific case is the defensive guy. And we just need to see more. We need to see more from that unit. All right. Now let's take a look at some of the good things. Of course, a lot of Chargers fans aren't going to be super stoked on any of these topics, but we did see some really good things from the Chargers this game. 228 and a touchdown from Justin Herbert. It doesn't scream success to me, but one thing I really wanted to point out that is a success that could definitely be built upon going forward is actually this little stat down here. Justin Herbert carried the ball 5 times for 18 yards and a touchdown. This is something that I don't know if I expected to see right away, right? Maybe implemented here and there, but it's something that you kind of started to notice with Dak Prescott in Kellen Moore's days with the Dallas Cowboys, wherein we're using all of the weapons or all of the tools on the belt of a Justin Herbert to convert. And this is something that we saw with Dak Prescott. I mean, he's not known as a running quarterback, but the dude can take off and keep drives alive. And I think that's something that we're seeing a lot more of this year, whereas maybe it was discouraged in the Joe Lombardi offense in the past. So I don't know. I got to tell you, I really like what I saw in terms of Justin Herbert being creative, trying to keep drives alive. Sure, he wasn't perfect. There are things that I think he could have done better in terms of protecting himself, in terms of getting guys open or extending drives, extending plays. But for the most part, this is a good sign to me. As long as he plays it safe and understands when to take a hit and when to go out of bounds and when to slide. We saw a great example of that today, by the way, the slidings to stay in bounds to keep the clock running. I'm actually pretty cool with that because that just means we're using all of our quarterback instead of a select few chosen talents of that quarterback. And that's something that a lot of people grew frustrated with in the Joe Lombardi system, is that we are definitely not using everything at our disposal that Justin Herbert has to offer. Now that he's been paid, now that he's with a proper offensive coordinator, I think we're going to see a lot more of that. Another great thing we saw from today's game, look at this even split right down the middle in this run game. Holy guacamole, Bolt fam, we have a run game. Somebody in the chat was talking about how incredible it was to see the Chargers put up, over 200 yards on the ground for the first time in a very, very long time. Okay, to see the Chargers run the football, we haven't seen an era like this in very many moons. Okay, and to see the Chargers go out week 1 and implement what we kind of expected in this new Kellen Moore system and be successful at it is really exciting. Okay, Austin Eckler, again, even attempts on Eckler and Kelly's part for 117 and a tutty, that's a good sign. Joshua Kelly, 16 for 91, very close to Austin Eckler for 91 yards and a tutty. That's a very good sign. Okay. And then, of course, the rest of the Chargers kind of chipping in here and there. This team has just become a lot more balanced. And this is, again, something that we absolutely expected to hear from the Kellen Moore offense. One of the biggest underrated aspects of the Dallas Cowboys in the past couple of seasons, or in their Kellen Moore era, was just how good that run game was, right? Well, here it is. Here's the run game of Kellen Moore with an Austin Eckler, with a Joshua Kelly, and it's working. It's working very well. And that's opening up. It will continue to open up, and it should open up even more going forward, the passing game. All right? So if we take anything good away from this game, I think a broad spectrum outlook of it, the offense is awesome, right? Welcome to the 2023 Chargers, where the offense is going to be one heck of a show every single Sunday, right? But the biggest part of that to me is that run offense. Okay, that rushing game, all of a sudden, very exciting. It's going to balance things out. And in the end, it's going to make Justin Herbert's life a lot easier. We just need a defense that can keep pace. Because right now, that defense, your run game can be as good as what we saw today, and it's not going to matter if that defense is allowing 36 points on the weekly. All right. A couple other things I kind of wanted to point out here. I did see a minimal utilization of guys like, I don't see him listed here. Maybe it wasn't listed as a rushing play here. Darius Davis had that one play where I was like, okay, he's starting to get involved right away. Let's see what that grows into. We saw a little bit of Quentin Johnston, which let's see what that evolves into. But I also saw evidence that this really is still the Mike Williams, Keenan Allen show, which is certainly very important. And they're definitely up to the challenge. We saw Mike Williams keep this game alive a couple of different times, despite going out with injury early in the first quarter. We saw Keenan Allen do what he does best, and extending drives and keeping the game alive. We even saw Austin Eckler, who was very slow in the first half, reel in 47 yards on 4 receptions, which again is very, very nice to see. So the Chargers, I think, in terms of weapons, in terms of scheme, in terms of offense as a whole, we're in very good hands. And I think moving forward, the offense is certainly what I'm most excited to see. If the defense can start stepping up and not allowing 36 points to the opponent, no matter how good their offense is, then I think we got a good shot at bouncing back from this defeat, learning a lot from it, and yes, still remaining as a very legitimate, playoff threat. But until then, until that defense can start keeping up with it, it's going to be very hard to convince me that we are more than a one-win team in the playoffs. I want us to be over 1.5 Super Bowl contenders, but that can't happen until the defense starts shaping up a little bit. Okay, so let's take these last couple of minutes here to talk a little bit about what you guys are concerned about. Get in the comment section and let me know your thoughts on this loss, but let's try and remain. I'm not saying, guys, be blindly optimistic. I'm saying that realistically, it's game 1. It was a tough game, a good opponent. The season's not over, not by a long shot. So let's be, rather than optimistic, let's just be realistic, right? Let's be realistic because the season's not over. This, like, the hope of the Chargers isn't, snuffed out, but we have stuff to work on. So I'm going to go here to the comment section, start reading some of these guys out here. Somebody's concerned about Kenneth Murray, who in coverage did allow a couple of plays. I think the one that you're referring to is the pass to the flat to the tight end that kept the drive alive that resulted in a touchdown. It could be the case, right? And I think we will see more of Daiyan Henley in the future. Of course, who was inactive today due to an injury. In those situations, I think we will see more Henley in coverage because he does have a bit more reliability in those situations. But yes, not the best first game for Kenneth Murray. Next up, looked good, and it's exciting to see them play out this season. I think the defense needs to tighten up. This was terrible. Letting a single player torch the defense is atrocious. We know Tyreek. We know what he does. It's like they got shell-shocked seeing him play. That's a really good point. We are not unfamiliar with the world of defending Tyreek Hill. That's a really good point. Who posted this? I can't say your name, but you know who wrote it. That's a very good point. What happened to the experience that we've had on Tyreek Hill since his days as a Kansas City Chief? We played him last season with the Miami Dolphins as well. What happened to all of that? Where's the defense? Where is the matchups? It feels like, I don't know, just a lack of preparedness. 200 yards on a player that you're used to playing against, that you've played against for a long, long time. That's atrocious. I don't know if I like that. I don't know if I like that. Big Bala coming in saying we need a star corner. And unfortunately, it didn't work out, at least so far, with JC Jackson being that guy. I'm not going to give up on the thought of him becoming that at some point. But JC, even more than catching up in coverage or catching up with the system or whatever you want to call it, that's causing him not to be what he was with the New England Patriots. Even above all of that, I need to see that veteran leadership and decision-making step forward. And that, again, it could be as a result of him not playing for so long. And yeah, there could be a million excuses, but there also could be a million excuses why he does become that player. So we can all hope and pray and just cross our fingers that that becomes the case eventually. I'm not going to give up on him quite yet, but I do agree that we need to see somebody step up. I think in the future, it's still going to be Derwin James, even though he's not our corner. I think he's going to be playing that role of, guys, we got to tighten things up. Guys, we got to get better in coverage. Guys, we got to start making plays for each other. And I think that's something that I do expect to see turn a corner at some point. Asante Samuel played good. That way we didn't hear from him. Yeah, and that's all. That Nightwave is absolutely. I feel that way too. When you feel like Asante hasn't been mentioned a lot, most of the time that's a good thing for a corner, right? It's like, we didn't see much of Asante. Most of the time that means that he was covering pretty good, and he just didn't get tested very often. I think Asante could end up being, and this is something I talked about in terms of like my my hot takes. And I was like, I think Asante could turn out being the Chargers' best corner this season. But he could probably have done a little bit more this week too. Everybody could have, considering the score. Another safety or cornerback in for K9. Yeah, I think the Chargers would be wise to using more safeties in lieu of K9. I know it's a little riskier versus the run, but if you're going to be asking him to cover, you even anticipate that he's going to need to cover, I'd rather have someone out there with that skill set, if that makes sense. And I know that the Chargers are rostering 5 safeties at this point. Maybe not a bad idea to mix that look in a little bit more often. Please share your thoughts on the pass rush. Ooh, that's a really good question. The pass rush this week. What happened? You guys see that on TikTok? What happened? Like, literally, what happened? What happened to the pass rush this week? In my game preview on YouTube, one of the biggest things I was anticipating on this game was the pass rush. For one, is it Teron Armstead, their left tackle for the Miami Dolphins? He was gone. He was hurt. He wasn't going to be playing this week. And that, to me, just said, oh, Khalil Mack is going to eat. But not just Khalil. You got Joey Bosa on the other side. You got Thule, who made a couple of nice plays this week. Where was that? Somebody in the comments mentioned that, well, for some reason, the Chargers aren't pressing. Not even like in man coverage or anything like that, to kind of buy the edge players a little bit more time to get to the quarterback. And yes, that can be the case. And yes, the tempo of the Miami Dolphins offense was a little bit too quick for any of that kind of stuff to develop. But still, where was it? And sometimes that's not entirely on the player. I saw a lot of people upset about Joey Bosa not logging a sack or Khalil Mack or anything like that. But to be honest, my eyes saw Khalil and Joey very close to sacks and disrupting plays a few times this game. At least 3 or 4. Which is, kind of what you're asking of these players, even at this, star level name. The problem was just not enough time to make anything out of it, right? They could have been, on and off their block instantly. And because Tua's getting the ball out under like 2 seconds, it doesn't really matter. That to me does say that maybe we could have done something a little bit more focused on that aspect schematically, right? Systematically. The planning in terms of the defensive coordinator and Brandon Staley could have utilized more technique to get those edge players free and actually get to the quarterback. And some people say that's press coverage. It could definitely be that. You're risking getting burned by Tyreek Hill if you do that. But at the same time, that kind of pressure, just getting in the head of that quarterback, that can make all the difference. So yes, I think pressure is something that the Chargers, they're going to have to work on, man. If they were able to log a sack versus a Miami Dolphins that didn't even have a starting left tackle with Joey Bosa and Khalil Mack and Tuli Tuipulotu, then we are in trouble this season. Because I anticipated that the pass rush becoming one of the, aspects about the defense or even the team that becomes widely known for. You know what I mean? Like, oh, the Chargers. Yeah, those are a really savage pass rushing team, aren't they? This week, we're not off to a good start that way. And I think the pass rush, if you were to look at the Brandon Staley system or scheme or whatever you want to call it in this Vic Fangio kind of world, I think the pass rush could end up being the most important aspect to that defense, to that system. And unless you find a way to get that free and get that open and get that to become effective, I don't know how far you're going to take this defense. So that's me. That's a really, really good question, man, in the comments. Very, very good question. Fire Silly promote Kalen. We talked about that at the top of the show if you want to go back and watch that later. What happened to our passing game? I felt like our passing game was fine because of how effective our run game was. You don't want to abandon the run if it's working, right? I think a lot of teams have used that against us in the past. But yes, we could have done something a little bit different. In the end, what are you going to do, right? What are you going to do? Well, guys, thank you to everybody so much for dropping in and joining us here on Bleacher Report. This has been a very tough start to the season. I'm not going to lie. I am disappointed. I know a lot of you guys are disappointed. A lot of anticipation and hype leading up to this game. A lot of Chargers fans anticipating, this whole unit with Kellen Moore and the offense and the defense and the money in each position, all that kind of coming together and proving that the Chargers are for real. Let me end this stream by telling you guys, it is still real. The 2023 Chargers and that narrative of what they could become in terms of not a super team, but a very legitimate Super Bowl threat, that narrative is still very much so alive. But we also opened up a wound. We opened up a narrative as well as in order to become their full potential and to meet that full potential that we all kind of anticipated in the offseason, they are going to need to fix some things. And the main thing that this team needs to fix on is defense, which ironically should be the strength of their head coach. Can he figure it out, and does he have enough time to sort it out before these losses start stacking up? Because let me remind you guys, this schedule is not going to get any easier. It's a tough, brutal season. You're going to have to win games like we just saw here. You're going to have to pull it together and find a way to overcome some of these scores, some of these crazy stats like Tua and Hill in order to overcome what we see on the schedule this year. Well, guys, thank you so much for joining me. This has been The Director. If you liked what you saw here, definitely hit us up with the follow here on Bleacher Report. You can find me on YouTube as always. We'll be live again on YouTube next week for that game. I will let you guys know whenever I'm live here on Bleacher Report after the game as well. This has been pretty fun. It's been pretty cool to see everybody in terms of if it's a win, if it's a loss. Let's talk about it. Because I think it adds to the hype or helps us heal with these fresh wounds right away. Well, guys, thank you so much for joining me. We'll hit you up next time. As always, bolt up, stay frosty, and keep your head up, Bolt fam. It's not the end of the world. You still got a great team in Los Angeles. They just got some things to clean up.